Marvel and DC Chaos, Dumbledore Powers Unleashed Across Universes. Episode 21, 117A, Brick Street. Inside the Supreme Sanctuary, the Mage King looked at Gooey in front of him with worried eyes and spoke. Supreme Mage, the magic riot over there is getting stronger and stronger. Do we really not want to go over? And according to the magic feedback comparison sensed by the sanctuary, it should be the ghost witch who was once sealed by Mage Merlin, and the other party tortured and killed thousands of ordinary people centuries ago, which is very dangerous. In his view, this is a big bomb, and the consequences of not dealing with it again are unimaginable. Fiorucci's gaze was empty, as if he had seen a long distance. She shook her head slightly. Don't be in a hurry, it's not time yet. The words of the Supreme Mage could not be questioned, and although the king was anxious in his heart, he could only wait in place. After a few minutes, Fiorucci's gaze focus suddenly became normal, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Only then did she say in a calm tone, Wang, you can go over with the mage who is responsible for processing the traces. Hearing the order, the impatient Wang immediately ran downstairs, but after running a step, he stopped abruptly and turned back in disbelief. Supreme Mage, shouldn't you bring the battle mage over? Gooey smiled and shook his head. The battle is over. Wang suddenly showed shock. Although that witch had obviously just broken the seal, her strength was definitely not as good as before. But even that is definitely not a small role. Wang even felt that even if it was him, even if he killed the other party, he would most likely be injured. Just now, he was worried that the mage who fought with the witch would die, but now he was completely worried about himself. Wang took a deep look at Gooey. It is worthy of being a supreme mage, everything is under control. Then I'll go. Wang bowed his head slightly and retreated, this time walking smoothly downstairs. The Obody Manor is in chaos. Harpy, who had been bragging with other bodyguards in the rest room, ran out at the first abnormal sound, and ran frantically towards the building that suddenly appeared. But because the manor was too large, when he was only halfway there, the explosion occurred. First, the ground suddenly trembled, and then a few seconds later, he was also overturned by the terrifying air current, and fell to the ground. When he came back to consciousness a few minutes later, he could only see ruins that looked like they had been bombarded by missiles, and black smoke was billowing from a distance. Boss, why did you get bombed by missiles again? Harpy knelt on the ground, stunned for a second, and then suddenly lost control of his emotions. He covered his face with his hands, and cried with his head on the ground. It's over, it's completely over. This time it's definitely dead. Dead. Even the ashes will not remain. What will I do if you die? Who will I be the driver for in the future? Harpy cried nonstop, like a big lump lying on the ground. Suddenly, a voice with a squeezed throat asked, aren't you claiming to be a master of red and white jutsu and a master of Sonda, and it should be easy to find your next employer? The sad Harpy didn't look up, and he didn't want to cry and hummed. You know a fart, follow the boss easily, you can also watch all kinds of beautiful women. The person asking the question no longer suppresses his voice. Oh, it turns out that you like to look at beautiful women when you give me work. Harpy, who was lying on the ground, suddenly trembled, and then raised his head little by little, and saw the familiar smelly face. Harpy cried with joy and blurted out in a crying tone, it's so good, I don't have to be a gravekeeper in the future. Hearing Harpy's true words, Tony was moved and hated to the root of his teeth. Finally, I could only sigh weakly. Forget it, it's really stupid for me to be angry with a fool. It's better to fine you with 3 months' salary to relieve your anger. Harpy didn't care about this at this time, wiped his face, and got up from the ground. Boss, how did you survive under the missile again? Is it God manifestation? In his opinion, this kind of dead and lifeless thing that his boss was actually fined twice. It was simply a miracle among miracles. Hearing this, Tony's mind once again recalled the six-winged angel and Russell's posture as if it were a god, suddenly said with some emotion, it's no different from God's apparitions. Huh? God has really appeared. This time, it was Happy's turn to be shocked, and he immediately considered whether he would need many letters after going back. Didn't he see that his boss bomb could not be killed? How could I find such a fool as a bodyguard? It's really hopeless. Tony didn't have a good airway. Not God, but Mr. Constantine who came to my rescue. Harpy looked left and right, but did not notice the other. Tony explains. He has a friend over there, as if to deal with this. Not looking for the FBI? In Harpy's view, such a big event must not be concealed at the moment. Hearing this, Tony immediately raised his eyebrows and smiled, imitating Russell's words at that time. Things on the mysterious side is solved, and others are not qualified. Saying that, Tony slapped Harpy's head. What do you know as an ordinary person? Gone. The scene of the explosion. Although the Mage King was calm on the surface, his heart had already made waves. He didn't expect the mage who defeated the ghost witch to be so young. Although some old immortals who have lived for a long time also maintain their physical youth, their temperament is very recognizable, and the traces left by time are clearly distinguishable. But the man in front of him is full of youthful taste, definitely not more than 30 years old. Wong couldn't help but think of what strength he had when he was 30 years old. It seems that not to mention the ghost witch, even the lowest level hell dimension imps may not be able to defeat it. Silently sighing in his heart, Wong smiled and spoke. Thank you very much for killing the ghost witch and avoiding a catastrophe. Russell looked righteous. My senior mage, it is my duty to protect the world, you don't have to be polite. Wang Yi's face was shocked. He really hadn't seen a mage with such a high level of consciousness for a long time. When I think about my youth, I suddenly feel a little ashamed in my heart. But what he didn't know was that Russell was also a little nervous. Because since he got here, he always felt that there was a line of sight watching him. Russell very much suspected that it was the old lady of Gui. Suddenly, Mage Wang, who wanted to continue to ask for some details, paused for a moment, but then smiled without a trace. I wonder if I have the honor of knowing your excellency's name. Russell didn't hesitate, and built a small number in a serious way. Just call me Dumbledore. Wang nodded, and then said a little embarrassed. It's like this, Master Dundon, according to the mysterious side regulations set by the Supreme Mage. This kind of thing needs you to go back to the Supreme Sanctuary with me to make a record. But don't worry, just record and don't do anything else. I can guarantee in the name of Karma-Taj that you will never be in danger. Russell thought for a while. Since he is in the Marvel world, he can't bypass Karma-Taj. And he estimated that the other party should be a wild mage who wanted to record outside. But what does Dumbledore's crime have to do with me, Russell, at that time? And even if he records the aura of magic, he is not afraid. He now has two kinds. Thinking like this, Russell smiled slightly. In that case, please lead the way. Episode 22. By the way, how do you deal with this situation? Russell asked, pointing to the traces around him. He was actually curious. After all, it seemed difficult to cover up the past in this situation. Wang smiled and said, I can only say that Karma-Taj has a magic weapon that can modify the memory of ordinary people, and other details cannot be told to you. Russell nodded, not asking for secrets. Then Wang directly opened a portal, and the two walked in together. The portal appeared on the first floor, and Russell came out with a hint of surprise. Unlike the movie, which can only see part of the scene, Russell found that the Supreme Sanctuary was actually very large. The passages on both sides of the first floor alone were extremely wide, and together they were nearly 100 meters long, with dozens of rooms that he did not know what they were for. And Russell can be sure that each room in this will not be small. In short, the size of these spaces together has completely exceeded the size of the house. However, Russell immediately understood that Karma-Taj was abnormal if he did not have a means such as the space extension charm. At this time, Wang spoke. Mage Dumbledore, please follow me to the second floor, record the specific process of the incident, and you can leave. Russell nodded, and then followed the other party to the second floor, to an interior with rows of wooden shelves. Then, according to his description, the Mage King used magic to record the process in a booklet. After doing all this, Wang sincerely thanked him. Then he was sent away without saying anything else. Seeing this, Russell was a little surprised. Could it be that he thought too much and really just recorded the incident? Although this was reasonable, he felt a little wrong anyway. Everything seems to be going too well. But it's okay. Russell quickly followed Wang's footsteps to the first floor. But just as he descended the last flight of stairs, a portal with sparks appeared in the center of the hall on the first floor, and then a bald head dressed in a bright yellow monk's robe walked out. Seeing Gui, Russell suddenly felt a little uneasy. He was a little afraid of the kidnapping of Tony before the other party settled the score. But the next moment, he heard the other party ask incredulously, Master Wang, who is this? It doesn't look like it's our Karma-Taj people, right? Groove, something is wrong with this old lady. Hearing the other party pretend to have never seen him, Russell immediately chuckled in his heart, but he didn't dare to say anything. At this time, the Mage King saluted slightly. Back to the Supreme Mage, this is Mage Dumbledore. Because the other party just killed the ghost witch who broke through the seal, and it was also witnessed by many ordinary people, as well as other deaths, I brought the other party back to make a record. Hearing this, Russell suddenly opened his eyes slightly and looked at the simple Wang with some surprise, and 3 big question marks appeared in his head. When you just asked me to record, there were no last 3 sentences. Sure enough, Russell immediately noticed that Gui immediately frowned after hearing this, and then looked at himself. Fiorucci said in a heavy tone, Mage Dumbledore, you should know that being witnessed by ordinary people, and because mages fight until ordinary people die, it is against the mysterious side rules. I know a fart. Russell almost blurted out, but after estimating the gap in strength between the two sides, he still did not dare, but turned his head to look at Wang. Is there really such a rule? Yes, just laid down. Wang nodded, embarrassed to speak up. Seeing this answer, Russell was stunned. He never expected that the bushy-eyed king would also rebel against justice. And this is not over. At this time Fiorucci spoke again. Wang, have you investigated the scene and determined that it was the ghost witch who broke the seal, not just the fight between mages? The corner of Wang's mouth twitched, and then responded, this. Due to the explosion at the scene, all traces have disappeared, so this is not certain. Gu Dian nodded. That is to say, at the moment, it is not certain that this Mr. Dumbledore in front of you is eradicating evil, right? Wong nodded. Indeed it is. Fiorucci looked at Russell and sighed. In that case, Mr. Dumbledore, can you prove yourself? Russell immediately replied, yes, I have a friend present and he can testify for me. But Russell still underestimated Gui and listened to the other party in the next second. Close relations cannot be witnesses. Russell almost laughed angrily. He could see it. Even if he really had evidence, it would be in vain. This old lady and Wong are playing themselves on purpose today. On the side, the king saw that Russell was a little angry and could only smile bitterly in his heart, and the Supreme Mage asked him to cooperate with the acting, and he did not dare not cooperate. Otherwise, if you were put in small shoes, you will be unlucky. For this, he could only apologize in his heart, and then lowered his head and looked at his nose and pretended to die. At this time, Fiorucci spoke again, but his tone had become gentle. Mage Dumbledore, don't be angry. For your situation, we Karmatage are still very humane, and we will not put you in the dimensional prison. But the next second, she changed her tone again. Of course, we can't let you leave just like that. That really damages the majesty of Karmatage and is not conducive to our maintenance of the mysterious side. But due to a little accident this while, Karmatage's battle mage was partially injured. Russell immediately showed an expression that I knew would be like this, and he didn't have a good airway. So, Fiorucci smiled slightly. So you can choose whether or not to become a supernumerary member of Karmatage and help us deal with some mysterious side events, so that the merits can be more than justified. Russell understood this time. The meaning of this old lady's words was that she wanted to let herself work for her. Scold. Am I the one who can blackmail at will? Also, the battle mage was injured. I believe it is a fool. I want me to promise to work part-time and do it during the day. Of course, you can also feel free to look at the books in the collection of Karmatage Library, which is a benefit for non-staff personnel. Fiorucci added, no problem, when will I take office? Russell asked with a straight face. He doesn't care what books are not books. At this moment, he only thinks about how to attach his thighs to Karmatage, and then maintain the peace on the mysterious side. That's right, that's it. Episode 23. Hearing Russell happily agree, Fiorucci showed a satisfied smile. Yes, knowing how to be flexible is not rigid, which is another advantage. She liked this very much, because rigid people often did not go far on the path of mages. Of course, if Russell refuses, she will let the other party go and will not make any trouble. But in that case, it is estimated that this will be the last meeting between the two sides, and there is no need to continue according to her ideas. On the other side, Wong, who was standing on the side and pretending to be dead, his eyes widened sharply, and Guyi's words were no less than a thunder in his heart. Did you hear it right? Feel free to look at the books in the Karmatage library. Others don't know. He doesn't know how precious those books really are. Where is this treatment of non-staff personnel? Even Karmatage will not have more than 20 mages with this permission. And not only that, there are several books in the library that only supreme mages can view. If the other party can still watch, then he can't imagine it. Guyi didn't say anything more, just instructed the queen to be responsible for communicating with Russell, and went directly to the second floor. Wong took a deep look at Russell, until he looked at Russell a little hairy, and suddenly asked with a smile, Mage Dumbledore, are your parents still alive? Although he didn't understand why he suddenly asked this, Russell replied, nope, his parents died early before crossing over, but he didn't lie. And hearing this answer, coupled with the fact that the Supreme Mage had not appeared for a few years more than 20 years ago, Wong suddenly showed such a look. At this moment, he felt that there was a 90% probability that his guess was correct. Otherwise, he couldn't understand why Guyi was suddenly so nice to an outsider. It's normal. Wasn't he also relying on his father and entering Karmatage at the age of 4? Although I have been greedy for early dishes due to my young age, I am still a late bloomer. After figuring out the key, Wong's smile became more and more enthusiastic, and he enthusiastically opened a portal, and immediately took Russell to visit Karmatage. Russell was not polite at all, and after not only walking around with the past, but also eating in the cafeteria. Later, at his request, Wong took him to the library. The Karmatage library is full of thousands of square meters, filled with countless magic books. However, Russell did not go far, but took a basic magic book and read it. Written inside is the analysis of the runes that build the foundation of Karmatage's magic system. Seeing this, Wong, who was sitting on the side, suddenly showed an extremely surprised look. Not to mention those wild mages who even dared to communicate with Sithorn for magic, let's say himself. If the two sides are opposed, the first thing he did after coming to the Karmatage library was definitely to find those powerful magics. The king knew how tempting these magic were to wild mages who had no inheritance outside. But at the moment, the first book that the other party read turned out to be the most basic book, and he really admired it from the bottom of his heart. This kind of willpower is not something that ordinary people can have, and it is worthy of being the supreme mage. Wong quickly coughed twice to hide his embarrassment, and just now, he almost said the words in his heart. Russell didn't care about Wong's cough, and continued to watch intently, even a little fascinated. In fact, to say that he is not interested in those powerful magics is nonsense. But, as a traverser, he knew what those spells really were like. For example, the magic that Strange used when fighting Thanos, the Crimson Chain of Ceterak, the Divine Sword of Visanti, the Wind of Vadum, the Ancient Body of Hogs, and more. In fact, none of this is Strange's own magic. Once the big guy above no longer agrees to use it, then the caster can no longer use a trace of power and directly become immortal. Even, Russell saw someone post on a forum that a certain universe user in the comics has to pay a price for using these magic, which is even more black-hearted. Therefore, everything that cannot be turned into its own magic is waste in Russell's opinion. In his eyes, there are only mirror space, portals, astral projection, alchemy, etc. And most importantly, how to steal these independent spells from other dimensions of energy is the most important. But all of the above requires foundation. He needs to follow the steps and cannot rush to achieve quick results. Can I take this book home and read it? After watching for a while, Russell suddenly asked. Wong showed a somewhat embarrassed look, because this was not allowed, but he immediately thought of a way. How about you go to my dormitory to rest? I'll just go to the temple to sleep. Russell was not embarrassed, and the other party was indeed kind. It doesn't have to be, I'll just come over every morning. Wong breathed a sigh of relief when he heard this, and immediately felt that Russell was still a relatively easy person to get along with. Much better than that rigid Mordo. Russell thanked him and continued to read until the evening. In fact, he could have gone back a little later. But not only did he have to teach Tony the occult, but he also had to feed the two cats in the house, and put each other in the bathroom by the way. He wasn't really a demon and wouldn't embarrass the two women in this regard. After dealing with these things, he will return to Karmatage to continue his studies, which is also a combination of work and rest. However, when Russell Phantom returned home, he was stunned. I saw that in front of him, a blonde beauty was imprisoned by the clay golem left in the shop, unable to move. At this time, he appeared at the moment he saw him, and his face suddenly turned pale. You are not human? The woman spoke tremblingly, her eyes full of fear. How can this girl scold people? It's really rude. Russell jerked his mouth open to reveal 2 rows of fangs, and said with a sly smile, "That's right, I'm a devil who eats people and doesn't spit scum." Inside the SHIELD subbase, Nick Fury answered a call again. A few seconds later, he stood up abruptly and roared, "What? The imitation bird is also lost." Episode 24. In this way, Russell once again liked to carry a cow cat, and then casually locked up in a cage. Inside the cage, the 3 cats first looked at each other and were silent for a moment, and then began to communicate with each other. As if speaking of sad places, Black Widow and Sharon Carter's cat eyes still shed tears, as if accusing Russell of demonic behavior. Eat cat food, don't go to the toilet, and be petted for 10 minutes before going to bed. Barbara's cat body suddenly shook, and the golden cat's eyes were full of fear. This time it seems to be really finished. Instead of staying at home, Russell went out to buy some food. When he got home, he first threw the 3 cats in the bathroom, waited for a while before putting them back in the cage with the flying charm, and then opened 3 cans and put them in. Seeing that the 3 cats still didn't eat, Russell suddenly sneered. "If you don't eat, don't go to the toilet tomorrow, continue to hold it." Hearing this threat, the 3 cats shook at the same time. Devil. Absolutely the devil. In the next second, the 3 cats moved forward a few steps with humiliated expressions in their eyes. After a while, Black Widow, who turned into a cat, felt even more ashamed, because she thought it was quite delicious, and the canned beef smelled strong. So did Sharon Carter, crying and eating and crying. The imitation bird was not hungry, but it also ate in the face of the threat. Outside the cage, looking at the humiliated eyes of the 3, Russell smiled inwardly. The food in the cat's canned food has actually been changed by him. It looks mushy inside, but it's actually beef curry, but it's just ground by his secondary processing. However, the 3 did not know, and thought that it was really a cat can. Russell laughed, and took out his phone to take a few pictures of the cat. It's worth collecting. Now his biggest regret is that he didn't have a mobile phone when he kidnapped Tony. But it's okay, there will be opportunities to shoot in the future. After seeing the 3 cats finish eating, Russell returned upstairs. Due to the fact that Tony and Obadiah's original plot was changed and killed by the Ghost Witch, Plus served as a supernumerary for Karmatage. On this day, the Russell exchange point was terrifying. That's 1100 points, enough for him to get all the power of Constantine. Without hesitation, Russell began the simulation. It took more than an hour, a total of 4 simulations, and after retching more than a dozen times, Russell finally increased the simulation of the character card to 100%. The takeaways this time are 100% knowledge of occult science, including divination, curse knowledge, sacrifices, demons, angels, etc., spirit of speech, sacred text of exorcism, black magic, hellfire summons, alchemy, biological grafting, alchemy, mystery house, witchcraft, out of body, witchcraft, hypnosis, magic, escape, black magic, resurrection, limitations and drawbacks, magic, expulsion of evil spirits, magic, teleport, short range. Russell was wet with sweat and lay dizzy on the bed. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, although the whole process was a little uncomfortable. But the harvest was still good, especially the House of Mystery and Resurrection. The former, needless to say, the latter, although it has shortcomings, is actually very powerful. Constantine once resurrected his ashes into a body after he died, and his body was cremated. Although there are flaws, at least Russell can find a chance to be reborn after an accidental death, instead of just dying, which can definitely be called a whole card. And speaking of which, Russell felt that he still had to thank Constantine's life experience. That's the Patronus charm. When Russell inherited all of Dumbledore's power, he did not directly obtain Dumbledore's Patronus due to the particularity of the Patronus charm. It was when he experienced Constantine's pit to the angel Gabriel, he felt and gained the happiness of the other party, which made him awaken the six-winged angel, the patron saint. Although he couldn't understand why it was an angel, it was powerful, far more damage than normal guardians to evil creatures. And he could also feel that the effect of this patron saint was not only that, but he had no clue now. In the same way as the Patronus charm, the Animagus in his transfiguration also failed, and something seemed to be missing. However, Russell is not in a hurry for this, and it would be even better if he could turn into a magical creature in the future. After a brief cold shower, Russell drove to Tony's house. Then he met each other directly in the garage. At this time, Tony's face was covered in sweat, and he was clanging something. Seeing Russell coming over, Tony immediately beckoned excitedly. Haha, John, you came just in time, I'll show you a big baby. Russell knew what the other party was doing, and suddenly shook his head in disinterest. Don't look, I'm afraid of needle eyes. The corners of Tony's mouth twitched suddenly. You want to see me and don't show it. That big baby is not visible except for beautiful women. Bah. What was I thinking? Tony shook his head and quickly pulled back the topic. I'm not kidding you, come and see how my new work is. Russell walked over and found that it was indeed the prototype of Mark's armor. Although he can't remember how many generations it is, just a few parts and drawings give him a strange feeling of reality and dream. Although the other party also embarked on the path of magic, he is still the Iron Man after all. At this time, Tony couldn't help but scream when he saw Russell's expression. I actually figured it out this morning. At least before I really learn magic, I should still have the ability to save my life, otherwise I can't expect to find you every time I encounter danger. Saying that, Tony showed a serious expression again. Speaking of today's matter, I haven't thanked you. Let's say, if you have any needs, don't hesitate to mention it. He will not forget the saving grace. Russell smiled, then pointed to the design of the armor and said, this armor looks good. If you have time in the future, you will also make me a set. Although this thing is useless to himself, there is a good saying that a man is a teenager to death. What man didn't expect to own a piece of this armor after seeing Iron Man? Even if you don't use it, it's good to be a large figure collection. Especially like Tony, there is a special room, and each glass display case has a different collection of warframes. Just thinking about it is very feeling. Maybe I can have such a room in the mystery house in the future. Tony agreed without any hesitation, and in his opinion, Russell not only did not deny that his armor was useless, but also very interested, which made him suddenly have a sense of identity recognized by the strong in his heart. There is a feeling of blood rush. In fact, Tony's ambition is more than that. He also created the warframe with the idea of creating a magic warframe in the future. Tony felt that it was better to rely on his own slow cultivation of magic power, and then it would be powered by the arc reactor in his chest, and then transform into magic by some means to release magic. Although the idea is still far away and will be difficult, he will not back down. Then Russell taught Tony some magic knowledge and magic texts, and then changed the Lamborghini and drove back. After returning home, Russell simply washed up until the 3 cats were born and went to bed. It was 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, and Russell in his sleep opened his eyes. He didn't sleep enough, he was awakened. The door downstairs was opened. Episode 25. Go back an hour. In S.H.I.E.L.D. Underground Base in New York, Nick Fury looked gloomy. He remembered the last time he felt so alarmed was when the Skrulls had secretly invaded. Now, however, that sentiment has resurfaced. First Natasha, then Sharon Carter, and just Barbara the imitation bird. Together, these 3 people add up. Nick Fury thinks that even if they are sent to kidnap the president, it is okay, but now they don't even know whether they are alive or dead. Right now, he feels that he can't send agents to find the reason alone, otherwise he may have no return. Soon, almost less than 10 minutes later, Nick Fury found the clue. According to street footage, both Sharon Carter and the imitation bird entered a spirit removal shop and never came out again. It's that simple? Nick Fury looked at the video loop in front of him, his eyes full of disbelief. It's also too easy. He thought it would take at least a few days to have a clue. Hill, who was standing opposite, shrugged. That's the way it is, but it could be that the enemy doesn't care about us. After Nick Fury pondered for a moment, he gave the order directly to Hill. This time, you will lead the team, and directly use the highest specification tactical squad and props. You must live to see people, and you must die to see corpses. I don't believe that a scammer shop is really a demon cave. Hill nodded solemnly and turned away directly. 10 minutes later, a high-level tactical squad composed of Hill as the commander, Coulson as the captain, Hawkeye, Crossbone, and other 18 agents assembled. After briefly explaining the task, the group took a camouflaged van to Hell's Kitchen, until they stopped at the corner of the street 100 meters from the target point. In the next second, with the remote power outage, the nearby street lights suddenly dimmed. Then the team came to the ground through the manhole cover on the right side of the sewer shop, and then divided into two teams. One of the teams came to the door silently against the root of the wall. The other team, with special gloves on their hands, easily climbed up the outer wall after lighting up with blue energy light. Over at the door, as the Crossbones took out a pen-like object and gently twisted it, a sharp blue fire blade suddenly appeared. As he gently swiped through the crack of the door, the gasket in the door lock suddenly turned into molten iron and came out. In the next second, the wooden door was pushed open, and the group touched it extremely quietly. At the same moment, a team of agents upstairs also cut the glass and entered the dark room one by one. However, just a second passed, and this group of confident high-level agents with various mission experiences all froze in place. Coulson clutched his pistol at this time, unable to believe what he saw. At this time, where in front of him was a small dark house, which was clearly a terrible purgatory. I stepped on a rock, and all the boiling and tumbling magma in all directions. There is no way to advance, no way to retreat. In the distance, terrifying volcanoes are erupting, countless lightning bolts roar in the smoke column, and huge fireballs explode into a rain of fire and scatter. The sky is even wrapped in crimson clouds, and from time to time evil spirits fly up and down. One step away, hell on earth. At the same time, almost all the other agents saw various doomsday scenarios. Hawkeye stood panicked on the edge of the cliff with a compound bow in hand, and below the cliff was a burgundy-haired woman who fell to her death on the rock, oozing a pool of striking blood. The other party's empty eyes stared at him deadly, as if questioning why he was standing on it. Nope, Natasha. No, how could you die? Fake. It must be fake. Hawkeye gulped for breath, and for a moment seemed unable to accept this fact. At this moment, Natasha below the cliff suddenly trembled, and then showed a resentful look. Blood kept coming out of her mouth, and she said with inarticulate resentment, why? Don't come to me, you come early. 10 minutes, I don't have to die. It's you. Killed, Hawkeye couldn't understand what happened before and knelt on the edge of the cliff, his eyes full of self-blame and pain. Syllable. He slapped himself angrily, but at this moment, he was shocked to find that the surrounding space flickered and tore apart. At the same time, the pain also made Hawkeye react. How could Natasha still speak when she died? Really fake? Hawkeye seemed to understand something in one moment, and decisively slapped himself again in the next second. Syllable. The scenery in front of him flickered and tore again, and the broken parts revealed other scenes. But it's still a moment. Hawkeye suddenly looked happy. It really had an effect. The next moment, he raised his hands without hesitation. On the third floor, Russell was holding a mobile phone to record the image at this time, and at the same time, his head shrank back from time to time, and his mouth made a sound of cold gasping. I saw that opposite him, Hawkeye was kneeling on the ground and slapping his big mouth, smiling while fanning, and Che didn't seem to feel strong enough, and after not slapped a few times, Hawkeye was replaced with a fist, and the clatter was hammered against the head. But it's also very effective. As the last punch fell, a bloody tooth flew out, and Hawkeye, whose face was swollen into a pig's head, found that it was finally not the nightmare scene in front of him. Then he saw that not far in front of him, a stranger was patting himself with his mobile phone, and said with admiration, "The first time I've seen such an illusion. Clint Barton, you're a ruthless silver." Episode 26. Illusionary magic, also from Constantine. However, this is not the kind of large-scale illusion that can change the real environment, but is closer to spiritual attack. Although it is a small spell, it is still not something that S.H.I.E.L.D. agents can resist. These people are all controlled the moment they break in. But Russell never expected that Hawkeye would accidentally find a way to crack and use pain to relieve the illusion. Punch after punch even knocked his teeth away, really hard enough for himself. Here, Hawkeye recognized the person in front of him as soon as he woke up, which was one of the goals of this mission. The other party's information has been investigated by S.H.I.E.L.D., the identity is false, and it is not known what purpose is to approach Tony Stark. It is clear that Black Widow's disappearance is also related to this person. In the next second, Hawkeye did not hesitate, and his extremely skillful backhand touched his back, wanting to draw a bow and shoot an arrow. However, there is no hard feeling, but extremely soft. Hawkeye was startled when he took it in his hand, and saw a huge mouse with red light in his hand. The next second, he instinctively threw the rat out. But to his shock, the mouse did not run away after landing, but remained motionless and then melted like a liquid and extended into a composite bow. At this time, the house was dark, plus the 7 or 8 agents who were motionless like corpses around, and the 3 vicious cats in the cage by the wall who were staring at themselves and screaming. It's all so weird. Hawkeye shivered unconsciously, and immediately understood that the person in front of him was definitely not something he could defeat. The next moment, he rolled to the wall without hesitation and raised the cat cage. He already thought in his heart that these 3 cats were definitely important things for that strange human being, and he didn't see the surprise in the eyes of the 3 cats. and then threw them towards each other hard. At the same time, this is also a cover-up. A tactical grenade has been stuck in his cage, flashing blue rapidly. Meow, rude words. X3. Listening to this rather humane and angry cat screaming, Hawkeye confirmed the guess in his heart. He sneered, and without hesitation, he broke through the glass and jumped downstairs, while casually throwing backwards. Suddenly, a hook claw flew out of Hawkeye's hand and stuck on the windowsill, and he himself landed smoothly under the buffer. The next second, he ran without hesitation. He wants to return to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury to report everything he encountered. Request to blast houses, long-range sniper mount control, close fire suppression, assault cooperation. He didn't believe that the other party could control that situation, but at this moment, he heard a clear voice from upstairs. Hawkeye is flying. In an instant, Hawkeye found his body floating in the air, and then flew backwards uncontrollably. Like an octopus struggling nonstop, it flew into the window and then landed in front of the terrifying figure. Russell carried the cat cage and smiled harmlessly at the confused eagle eyes. I don't like male cats very much, so I can only change an animal for you. As the words fell, Russell stretched out his hand, and suddenly, Hawkeye felt a whirlwind. A second later, he noticed that his surroundings had become huge. No, it's not that the surroundings have become bigger, it's that I have become smaller. Hawkeye figured out the key in an instant, and as soon as he raised his hand, he found that it had turned into a mouse paw. But before he could think about why, he found that his body suddenly soared again and fell into the cat cage with a whoosh. Russell made the cage fence denser and put it back in place. Then he smiled and said, "3 ladies, he almost blew you up with a grenade just now, and now he has a grudge and a revenge." Hearing this, the eagle eyes of the fallen 7 meet 8 elements suddenly startled in their hearts, as if they thought of something. There were 3 cats in the cat cage just now, and S.H.I.E.L.D. lost 3 female agents and turned themselves into rats. Squeaky, no. Hawkeye didn't know what to think, and the rat's body shook suddenly. In the next second, he slowly raised his head, and sure enough, he saw 3 huge cat heads in a triangle, and the cat was looking down at himself with a sinister smile. Next, a harmonious scene of cats playing ball was staged in the cage. Russell could see that the 3 cats were very satisfied with the new hamster toy and did not want to stop their paws for a moment. Nodding, Russell went to the second floor to make a large box out of clay, turning everyone except Hill into statues and putting it inside. Turning into an animal requires too much mana to maintain every day, or there are fewer dead things. And this is still the situation where Constantine's character card contributed almost 30% of his magic power. Otherwise he would have directly knocked this group of people unconscious and imprisoned. Then he turned Hill into a cat and put it in a cage to be with Natasha and others. At the same time, he did not forget to take out the loveless eagle eye that was played as a ball from it, and then also turned the other party into a sculpture and threw it to the second floor. After doing all this, Russell went to the street and released a spell again, and then returned to catch up on sleep satisfied. In S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury's heart became more and more uneasy. Just now, the high-end tactical squad he sent out completely lost contact, just like Black Widow and the others before. After a few minutes, he couldn't sit still at all. Complaints, can't wait. The next moment, he did not hesitate to gather hundreds of agents, as well as call out informed thermal weapons guard formation with anti-terrorist requirements, and then set off towards Hell's Kitchen. Along the way, the transporters and armor were very shocking, and the snakes and rats hiding in Hell's Kitchen changed their faces wildly, but they immediately realized that the other party was not here to catch them at all. Not long after, all the vehicles drove out of Hell's Kitchen again. Only Nick Fury was left with a car parked, standing stunned on the side of the street. He couldn't understand what was happening. In front of him, there was only a cake shop with a 2-story building and an electrical shop. The Dumbledore remover house in that video never seemed to appear, like a ghost. Episode 27. Nick Fury pondered for a moment and walked towards the middle of the 2 buildings. He wanted to see if he could find something. Otherwise he was really unwilling to go back like this. But just after taking 3 or 4 steps forward, a confused look appeared in his one-eyed eyes, and then he seemed to remember something and turned around and drove away without hesitation. About an hour later, Nick Fury, who was about to lie down to sleep, sat up sharply. He breathed heavily, and his eyes were full of shock. Why should I go home? I am obviously anxious in my heart. I obviously want to see if there is anything wrong between those 2 houses. Why did you come back without doing anything? After shaking his head fiercely, Nick Fury's face became extremely gloomy. Not long after, he returned to S.H.I.E.L.D. again. This time, he did not call in agents, but asked a technical team to carry out the instruments to investigate. But less than half an hour later, the group returned to S.H.I.E.L.D. with their instruments in hand, seemingly forgetting what they were going out for. Nick Fury was not surprised, and then sent 2 more teams. The front group repeats the previous behavior, and the back supervises, but still useless. When the front group is just about to measure, it will still suddenly choose to leave, and the back instantly opens its mouth to remind from the headset is useless, and the other party seems to be unable to hear it at all. At this time, the sky was already slightly bright, and Nick Fury did not continue trying. He knew it would be useless to continue, unless he could convince Congress to bomb there. But that's impossible. Until the sun rose, Nick Fury took a cell phone out of a safe and dialed a number he had never called before. The phone rang for more than a minute before it was answered. Before the other side could speak, Nick Fury immediately spoke. "Hello, I'm the current SHIELD director Nick Fury. I'm looking for the Supreme Mage." At this moment, Nick Fury once again remembered the night many years ago, when the woman in the yellow monk's robe appeared silently in his office. Then the other party told him that the world is not so simple. SHIELD is responsible for the normal world, and the world on the mysterious side is not allowed to meddle. As the king of agents, of course, he will not be bluffed, and then he will be slapped out of his soul by the other party's palm and experience a free galaxy roaming. And then he was honest. However, at that time, the other party also said that once SHIELD encountered a mysterious incident, he could also call her. Now he thinks it's that moment. At this time, the other end of the phone rang in response. How could SHIELD have? Oh, I remembered that the Supreme Mage had explained this matter. You can just tell me something, and now I am in charge of this matter. Nick Fury didn't get tangled, immediately said the matter, and then asked, "By the way, that mysterious man has a name called John Constantine. Do you have any clues there?" The other end of the phone stopped for a moment, as if reminiscing, but after a moment it was negative. "I haven't heard of it. But you don't need to worry, we will send a powerful mage over to assist, and we can definitely solve the problem." After hanging up the phone, Wong was not in a hurry. It wasn't until Russell arrived at the New York temple that he spoke. "Mage Dumbledore, there is a task for you to complete today." Russell did not refuse, since the other party gave benefits. It was very reasonable to pay his own labor. But soon Russell felt that something was wrong, and as Wong recounted, the more he listened, the more he seemed to be talking about himself. Until Wong said the name Constantine, Russell was a little stupid. He had just started to bump his two trumpets together. "This is over, didn't I catch myself?" Russell was somewhat silent. When he wanted to go to SHIELD, should he disguise another human face and build a trumpet and release the person, and then say that Constantine was not caught? Otherwise, there seems to be no other way, and you can't really catch yourself. But at this moment, a calm female voice sounded in his ears. Russell was stunned for a moment, but after finding that Wong didn't have any abnormal expression, he immediately knew that Guyi's voice could only be heard by himself. And the other party only has one sentence: integrate and dominate SHIELD. Russell was amazed. He didn't expect Guyi to make such a request to him, and the other party seemed to know that Hydra was in SHIELD. Just as Russell was still thinking about why Guyi did this, another voice sounded in his ears. "There is a reward for completion. I am so confident that I actually said it was done." Russell nodded to Wong very cheerfully. "No problem, leave it to me. Whether it is not to build a new trumpet, or the reward of the ancient one, or the exchange point that will definitely be obtained because of this, Russell has no reason to refuse." It's 9:30 in the morning. Nick Fury was so anxious that he couldn't sit still in his office. Suddenly, a phone rang. Moments later, Nick Fury hurried out and drove out of SHIELD alone. Not long after, he drove to the beach. Then I followed the information to a beach and smoothly found a man with a straw hat on his face and lying on a deck chair enjoying the sun. "Is it Mage Dumbledore?" Nick Fury asked a little cautiously. Hearing the voice, Russell slowly took the hat off his face and looked at the brine egg in front of him with a smile. "That's right, it's down." Human joys and sorrows are often disconnected. Looking at the strange and familiar face in front of him, Nick Fury suddenly froze in place. At this moment, his one-eyed eyes were full of shock and nervousness. How so? Is there anyone who can tell him what to do if the police arrested the murderer? Wait online, it's quite urgent. Episode 28. Russell did not get up, but casually snapped his fingers, and suddenly, the sand pile bulged on the ground and quickly transformed into a beach lounger. Then he turned the straw hat in his hand into sunglasses and put it on his face, and then he spoke. "Sit, don't be nervous, I won't do anything to you." Unfortunately, his words not only did not make Nick Fury not nervous, but his body became even more tense, as if he was about to attack at any time. The scene just now was too magical, and Nick Fury was not only frightened, but also had a sense of powerlessness with cold hands and feet. He, the so-called king of agents, may not be any different from ordinary people in the eyes of the other party. At this moment, his wisdom and force were useless. After taking a deep breath, Nick Fury did not question why it was the murderer, but asked, "Are they dead?" After asking, Nick Fury stared at Russell's sunglasses deadly, as if to see if the eyes below were lying. Russell didn't care, waved his hand. "No, they're all alive and well, but Hawkeye may be in worse shape." Nick Fury was relieved to hear the first sentence, but the latter sentence made him worry again. "He's dying?" Russell pulled his sunglasses down slightly, revealing a gap, and said with some surprise, "I look like a badass? Can you remove that image word for me?" Nick Fury was very heartfelt and did not speak. Russell smiled, took out his mobile phone directly from his arms and clicked on a video and handed it over. Nick Fury took the phone suspiciously, and then after a few seconds his face became unnatural. that fist hurts when he looks at it. Nick Fury returned the phone and sat down on the recliner, now feeling much lighter than before. He did not choose to pull the big banner of the terrifying bald head, but went straight to the point. Say, what's the request? In his view, all collisions are nothing more than the word interest. Although the other party is a person from the mysterious world, he must also have a demand like a normal person and can trade. Hearing this, Russell shook his head, then lay back and said softly, cut off one head and two will grow. With a sudden, Nick Fury stood up abruptly, and his eyes were full of horror and shouted, "You're Hydra!" But after saying this, he knew that it was impossible. If it is true, then there is no need for this conversation today, and it is better to kill him directly or imprison him. What the hell do you mean? Nick Fury asked a little unsurely. Russell lifted Erlang's leg and asked leisurely, I just wanted to ask you, did you really cut your head clean? Nick Fury reacted quickly and immediately blurted out, you mean, Hydra still has remnants? Remnants? Russell laughed mercilessly, and the laughing Nick Fury's scalp was numb before wiping his tears and saying, Comrade Halogen, do you have any misunderstanding of this word? Oh no, I shouldn't have called you that. What I should call you is Director of the Serpent Shield Bureau. Nick Fury was angry for a moment when he heard this, but immediately with his brain, he thought of something to react. He looked incredulous, he only felt a cool breath rushing straight from the tail vertebrae to the heavenly spirit cover, and his black face turned several points white. Click. Nick Fury was interrupted by the voice to think and come back to his senses, but did not dare to ask for the photo. Russell casually withdrew his phone and stood up. The two chaise longues dissipated like quicksand, and he grabbed Nick Fury's arm. Nick Fury suddenly looked terrified and almost couldn't resist pulling out his pistol. What are you going to do? Russell showed 2 rows of white teeth and smiled. Take you to the joy of magic. Having had the experience of Guyi's great force trick, Nick Fury screamed with fear on his face. Wait, I'm not sure. In the scream, the bodies of the two twisted and disappeared instantly. In the quiet room, 4 cats are playing a game of playing mice. Suddenly, a bang broke the calm. Nick Fury fell to the ground, then rolled over sharply and gagged. I feel myself vomit. It seems to be stuffed into a water pipe, gagging. Turned 18 bends, gagging. Next time. Don't want it, gagging. Russell smiled back. It's okay, just get used to it after a few more vomits. A few more times my bones will have to fall apart. Nick Fury took a deep breath and slowly got up. After looking left and right, he gasped. This is your spirit removal house? Russell nodded. Seeing this, Nick Fury looked around again, but did not see Natasha and the others. But at this moment, the sound of 4 cats barked and attracted his attention. Nick Fury didn't feel anything wrong yet, but when he saw the hamster lying on his back in the cage, he suddenly felt a shiver in his heart. Not only because the cat didn't eat mice, but also because the hamster's head was significantly larger, and his eyes also showed a human invincibility, very much like a person. Barton? Nick Fury tried to shout. Hearing this voice, there was a hint of clarity in the hamster's eyes. It slowly turned around, and a pair of eyes the size of a green bean suddenly turned into the size of a soybean, and then large hot tears flowed out. In the next second, the hamster rolled over and squeaked in its mouth, and was about to run towards the edge of the cage. Syllable. At this moment, a cat's claw fell from the sky and ruthlessly trampled it under its feet, revealing only a small paw to prove that it was still alive. Episode 29. Seeing the tragic situation of Hawkeye, even Luo Ren, who was the initiator, gasped. It's so ruthless. Once there was an ancient stumbling flight stark, now there is a black widow cat's paw stepping on the eagle's eye. Sure enough, the creature of the woman is the most vengeful. At this time, Nick Fury also saw that the 4 cats were probably also agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and one of them looked very much like Natasha. I just don't know why I want to trick Hawkeye. As if hearing the doubts in his heart, Russell explained with a smile. Hawkeye went to the cage and stuffed a grenade and almost served them a pot. The corner of Nick Fury's mouth twitched. That's no problem. Coming out is good for physical and mental health. He stopped looking at Hawkeye's misery and turned to look at Russell. I'm going to meet other people. No problem. Soon, Russell took Nick Fury on the 2nd floor to see the people turned into statues. Although it is a little abstract, Nick Fury still recognizes Coulson at a glance. The other party's high hairline is too prominent. Nick Fury was completely relieved. These were the top agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at the moment, and he simply didn't know what to do if these people were all dead. Say, what do you want? Nick Fury asked again. Russell still shook his head, and then squinted slightly. Now, let's get back to the key question, Mr. Director of the Serpentine Shield Bureau. Nick Fury suddenly felt cold in his heart. He almost forgot about this. More than half an hour later, Nick Fury was lying on the beach again and vomiting, and there was no Russell by his side. What the hell is this teleportation? Next time I will definitely walk back, gagging. After a pause and feeling relaxed, Nick Fury dialed a number. Moments later, he drove in the direction of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Trident base, while emotions began to brew on his face. After arriving at the base, he took the elevator all the way to the top floor. Although he is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Alexander Pierce, a minister of the World Security Council, has greater authority. The other party is also the former director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the current office is still on the top floor of the building. And just now, he had already spoken by phone in advance, and at this time, the other party was on shield, without going out for a meeting. Soon, Nick Fury, led by a secretary, unloaded his pistol and walked inside the door. Pierce's office is large, divided into two parts, inside and outside, separated by a layer of transparent glass. He was sitting in a chair by the huge floor-to-ceiling window, his eyes looking into the distance and not knowing what he was thinking. Hearing footsteps, the somewhat old-looking minister turned around. After seeing the person coming, his face showed a hint of helplessness, and then complained. "You made too much movement this morning. Do you know how much trouble it cost me to call a hot force guard into the city for no reason? The head of the United States and the council has called me 3 times to complain and asked me to give an explanation. What the hell are you doing?" After Nick Fury walked inside, he slumped down on a chair with some weakness. Instead of answering, he sighed. "It's troublesome, but it can be solved, can't it?" Seeing his demeanor, Pierce's pupils shrank, but he immediately returned to normal and asked with a concerned look, "You don't look quite right. It's the first time I've seen this ugly expression on your face in so many years. What happened?" Nick Fury's face immediately showed a look of regret and grief. Then, as if to hide his emotions, he raised his hand again and pinched his forehead to cover his expression. After a dozen breaths, he took a deep breath and said, "Hawkeye, Black Widow, Level 8 Agent Coulson, Level 7 Agent Imitation Soundbird, Deputy Chief Hill, and a dozen Level 6 agents were all killed." Hearing this news, Pierce stood up abruptly and looked shocked. Instead of going to comfort Nick Fury, he quickly left the office and went out to make a phone call. Soon, messages came out of the phone. The bodies of the above people were found just a few minutes ago in a spirit removal shop in Hell's Kitchen, which was very miserable. Listening to this news, Pierce was instantly extremely excited in his heart. He actually knew what Nick Fury was doing this morning, and he knew that these people were missing. But he didn't expect the good news to come so quickly, although a crossbone is put in, but good death, because almost all of the others are Nick Fury's promoted cronies, which is the biggest stumbling block to his restoration of Hydra's glory. Originally, he was still waiting for 4 space carriers to go to the sky with insight and plan to kill everyone, but now it seems that he can completely advance by years, and Hydra can finally act in the sun. "Are you sure?" Pierce asked again uneasily. After hearing the confirmation answer, Pierceton felt that today was really a good day, and it seemed that the stuffy air in the office was also relaxed. Almost just thinking for a moment, Pierce stood in the doorway inside. At this time, he was still holding a glass of champagne in his hand. "You are?" Nick Fury's eyes showed confusion, and his face was full of incomprehensible expressions. Haha. Pierce took a sip of champagne, and he no longer suppressed the joy in his heart. "Answer me, Nick Fury, what does a head cut off become?" "A head cut off." Nick Fury muttered a word, and the next second stood up sharply, his eyes full of disbelief and rage. "You." Before he could speak, Pierce laughed and nodded. "That's right, it's what you think. Cutting off one head will of course turn into 2 heads. Long live Hydra." Pierce pretended to say something and became even more excited. He looked Nick Fury up and down with a satisfied expression. "You know what, I've been expecting this expression from you for a long time, and I finally saw you today. This is really... that's great." Nick Fury still couldn't believe it, a little unbelievable. "When did Hydra resurrect and infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D.? I can't be unaware of it." Pierce laughed even more, and it seemed that because he had been holding back for too long, he enjoyed the desire to tell. "Infiltration? No, Hydra never perished, but at that time we saw the form clearly and thought that parasitism was more conducive to hiding within a new force. So, in a way, Hydra is also one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing this, Nick Fury didn't have any luck anymore, just asked, "Let me ask one last thing. How many people in S.H.I.E.L.D. are Hydra?" Pierce thought about it and said without care, "About 2/3, we're doing slowly." "This is still slow. If it is fast, I am afraid that I am not the only one left and not Hydra, but for now, it's okay, and there is salvation." Nick Fury made an angry gesture. "You told me so. You want to kill me, right?" Pierce shook his head, his eyes full of excitement. "No, no, no, some secrets of S.H.I.E.L.D. are known only to you, so it's not a pity to kill you like this. At least you can't die until you get those news." The next second, he stepped back and whispered into the headphones at the same time, "Come in." The door opened again, and a masked soldier with a cold air walked in. Nick Fury turned his head and saw the other party's eye-catching metal arm at a glance, and immediately shouted out in surprise, "Winter Warrior." Pierce showed a smug look. "You know that you have been injected with super serum, although the version is a bit low, but I still have to be careful." However, hearing this, the anger on Nick Fury's face faded and became calm again. He looked at Pierce and said coldly, "Actually, I don't think you're careful enough." Seeing the other party's expression, Pierce's brows frowned slightly, but after thinking about it carefully, there was no deviation, and his face once again had an expression of victory. "You're still the same old way, and you like to pretend to be a ghost, but..." It didn't work. This time the advantage was on me. But at this moment, a 4th person's voice suddenly appeared in the room. "I'm sorry, I think it's still useful." Episode 30. As the voice fell, Russell's figure appeared from the air inch by inch, and looking at the young man who suddenly appeared in front of him, sitting casually at the parliamentary table, holding his arms and looking at him with a smile. Pierce's expression also changed from a victorious posture to disbelief. Russell liked the other party's change of face and explained with a soft smile. Illusion charm. It's just a very simple invisible magic, but it's very practical. Then he patted the shoulder of the brine who began to pretend to be a big guy again, and praised. But one thing to say, I think Nick Fury's acting skills are better. And even I almost believed the emotional interpretation just now. Pierce looked at Nick Fury grimly. I can't figure out how the hell you found out that I was wrong. And the price you paid to deceive me is too great, even a group of cronies can be sacrificed at will. Saying that, he looked at Russell again, and squeezed a friendly smile on his face. This friend, you can also see it, people like Nick Fury are not worth selling. It is better to come to us, Hydra. He promised you that I can give you double the wealth and power. Russell suddenly showed a surprised expression and said, really? There was a show? For a while, Pierce smiled even more. I can swear by the glory of Hydra and do what I say, Russell said with a look of joy. Since you said so, I can't help but give you face. Then in the future, I will be the lord of the Hydra, and you can go home and retire. Boy, you dare to fool me. Pierce shouted angrily. Russell shrugged, telling the truth or not. And seeing his expression, Pierce showed shocked eyes, and then looked at Nick Fury in disbelief. You're crazy to agree to such a request. Nick Fury snorted coldly. You better worry about yourself. In fact, Nick Fury's first reaction after hearing this request at the beginning was also refusal. But Russell directly pulled out the banner of GUI, and took the other party to the New York temple, and then told the other party some small part of the terrible history of the Earth. In short, S.H.I.E.L.D. will no longer be able to protect the world in the future, and there must be a choice. Either it will be disbanded, or the person sent by Karma Taj, that is, Russell, will be the new sword bearer. In fact, after he learned about some terrifying existence, he had already agreed in his heart, not to mention that he could completely solve the Hydra crisis. Of course, if Russell is evil in the future, he will not honestly go down and not resist. Pierce didn't know so much insider, but with the Winter Soldier by his side, he didn't think he would lose when he calmed down at this time. Although the mysterious person appeared very strangely, everything still has to be spoken with hard power. Maybe it's you who should be worried, old friend. In my opinion, the result is already doomed, you can't turn over. The strength of the Winter Soldier is the most clear. Pierce snorted coldly and waved his hand directly. Go, kill both of them. In this case, he doesn't care about Nick Fury's secret. Victory is the most important thing. The Winter Soldier, who had always been silent, suddenly raised his head after hearing the order, and ran towards Russell the next moment. And Pierce was not idle, turned around and ran out the door. He wasn't stupid and didn't put all his fate on the Winter Soldier. As long as he can run out the door, as long as the summoned Hydra agents arrive, then the victory must be his own. There are only two people on Nick Fury's side, and he can't turn over any storms. However, at the moment he turned around, a sudden crackling sound appeared. Then a black shadow whistled in his ears with a gust of wind and flew over. Bang! With a loud bang, Pierce saw the Winter Soldier's chest scorched black, and his body slammed the metal door that could not even be smashed by a grenade. How can it be? What just happened? Just when he understood what was happening, he saw a red light cut through the air like lightning, hitting the Winter Soldier's chest almost instantly. The Winter Soldier, who was almost invincible in his eyes, suddenly screamed, and then his body fell limply to the ground, blood constantly oozing from under the mask, and his life and death were unknown. 2 hits. Defeat with just 2 hits. Damn it, where did Nick Fury find such a horrible person? At this moment, Pierce roared madly in his heart, feeling that he had fallen from heaven to hell in an instant, and he didn't dare to move his steps at all when he just turned around. He was afraid that as long as he moved, the next lightning would hit his body. Even the Winter Soldier who had been injected with super serum could not block 2 shots, and he felt that he would die in an instant. However, at this moment, more than a dozen blasting sounds sounded in the gap around the metal door, as well as violent vibrations. The next moment, a team of heavily armed agents broke through the gate and raised the automatic rifle in their hands. They were Hydra agents that Pierce had placed on the top floor for a similar moment at this moment. The call method is also very simple. Pierce's ring is actually a signal transmitter, as long as he presses inward with his thumb to emit it. At the same time, it was at this moment that Pierce jerked down his body. Those Hydra agents seemed to have rehearsed countless times, pulling the trigger without any hesitation. Nick Fury's face changed wildly, and the moment the agent appeared, he instinctively wanted to lie on the ground. But at this time, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Russell still sitting on the table. Not only did he not have the slightest panic on his face, but there seemed to be a hint. Bored? How is this possible? Definitely read it wrong. Although just now, with a casual finger of the other party, he released something like lightning to instantly defeat the Winter Soldier, which really shocked him. But right now, against the bullet storm, it's not the time to do it. But then he heard a calm word. It doesn't make any sense. Russell shook his head slightly, and then gently blew forward, as if blowing a dandelion. But it was at this moment that Nick Fury, who had pounced, saw a picture that will never be forgotten in this life. He saw the dense storm of bullets spit out from the 6 or 7 tons of fire, and stopped sharply as he flew less than 2 meters in front of Russell. The next moment, these orange-yellow warheads trembled slightly, turned into yellow butterflies, and then flew around Russell. Bang! Nick Fury fell to the ground, but didn't feel any pain at all. He looked back, and at this moment he only felt that he seemed to see a god.